So when we think we want to gain muscle mass and we think of a pound of muscle, you know, we see all those different displays where they have like the pound of meat versus the pound of fat. And so this actually, we're going to have both of them in there together, and you can see the size of it compared to my hand. So, and I'm a small person, so that's how much a pound is. So yes, if you were to gain a pound of muscle in a month, which if we are maximizing muscle gain, then that's probably about right. That is about how much muscle mass you'll pack on. So that really seems like, you know, that's a nice little chunk of muscle, right? So we're going to try to break this down though into realistic terms, because a lot of times we look at it like that and we just think like, wow, you know, just a chunk of muscle there. I would like that. But let's take that a step further. Okay, so I've taken our mass, our lean mass, and I have divided it into 4 sections so that we can now see, you know, if our pound was what we wanted to gain per month, then now we're looking at what we would want to gain per week. So we have them split up into all of the different sections. Okay, and now remember, we are looking at per week maximal muscle gain for women. If you were a guy, you could probably double these numbers, so maybe 2 pounds per month or 1 pound for women, and then that breaks down to a 1/4 pound per week. So this is like about the size of a 1/4 pound hamburger, or 1/2 pound for guys. So if you were a guy or possibly a newbie, then you could expect to gain about that much per week. Now remember, we are talking about, even though this still looks like it's a nice chunk and like the original part looked like it would be a nice amount of muscle to have, remember we are talking about this amount of muscle, okay? You can see in the palm of my hand, and I'm 5'2", so I have really tiny hands. This amount of muscle would be spread all over your body. Okay, so this is not just your bicep, you know, this is not just your tricep or your delt or something like that. Then yeah, that would be a great amount of muscle. But we're talking about this much spread out all over your body all week. So it shows you how little it really is and how compact that muscle is. So it's just something to keep in mind when people feel like they are gaining muscle too fast, or sometimes you feel like I can see the muscle already. Remember, this is going to be broken down. This is a week's worth of muscle maximized, but it's going to be broken down even further, because you may only gain this amount per week. You know, this is half of that. So this is a 1/4 pound of muscle. You may only gain half of that. So depending upon, because the smaller you are, you know, there's different things that tie into how much. So remember, we're talking about maximizing. This is what you're hoping to get, but you could just get this, or you could just get that. And this is spread out all over your body. This is not just compacting in one place. So that is why, you know, a person may bulk for a month and feel like, oh, well, I've gained so much, but they haven't really gained that much muscle. So you may bulk for only a month or two, and then you think that you're going to cut and have these massive gains, but you will not. This is why when you are having concentrated muscle building times, you want to stick it out for as long as you can, because you want to maximize and you want to actually put on muscle. And if you're only gaining this amount per week, yes, that's going to build up, and eventually you are going to have really, really nice gains, but you will not see them necessarily right away, which brings another point. If, like we're saying, this is going to be spread out all over your body, so now we're talking about do you see what I mean? I mean, that could be your bicep, tricep, you know, bicep and tricep on the other side, you know, some leg muscle because legs take up a lot of your muscle gain. And then, you know, maybe some deltoid use here and there. So that's, we see it when it's spread out like that. That's really, we're not dealing with that much gain here. And muscle is so compact that yes, you want to build as much of it as possible. And even though it may add to your weight and you will seem like you are gaining weight, it's so dense and tight underneath there that once the fat is gone, or even if you're gaining a little bit of fat with it, it's really not that much. It's really nice, tight, lean, compact muscle, which is what you want. So that brings me to the next point, and that is if you're not gaining muscle mass. So if only 0.25 of your gain is muscle, where is that other gain coming from? So this is where two things come into play. One, this is why you want to gain slowly, because if this is the max amount of muscle that you can put on in various places over time, or per week, or per month, you want your gains to come slowly, because if you're gaining too much, then obviously it's not all muscle. So you want to only eat, you know, 200 maybe over maintenance, 200-300 max. Like I said, it differs for your size and weight, but you don't want to gain too much or too fast, because it's obviously not all going to be muscle. So guys are usually the ones that have issues with this. Guys usually think they're gaining twice as much as this, and if they're not putting on massive weight on the scale, then they think that I'll just eat more. You know, if I eat more, then I will just keep gaining and gaining, and you know, and then you have all this mass that you're going to get because they're gaining on the scale, so they think they're putting on more muscle. But that's not really, because if a guy can gain twice this much in a month, that's still it. That's still the most that you can do. So if you're putting on 2 pounds of muscle, but you're gaining 10 to 20 pounds a week, you're not gaining 10 to 20 pounds of muscle. So for guys, that is your take-home message, is that the max you can gain is still the max that you can gain. So stuffing your face more is not going to put on even more muscle. But for ladies, the take-home message for you is, don't think that, you know, I lifted a little bit of weight and, oh, I gained so much muscle. Because if that's all you gained, especially if you're eating in a deficit or you're not in a specific muscle building standpoint, then you're probably gaining even less than that. So don't feel like I've gained so much, so I must have gained massive amounts of muscle. Which makes us wonder, where then is the weight coming from? And I will move this. I'll make you stop staring at the meat now. That is actually going to be my dinner. So, in case you're wondering, I don't just play with meat. I am actually multitasking here. Okay, so I'm back. I had to go wash my hands, obviously, after dealing with the meat. But we are going to talk about where some of that... Now, this part is really going to be geared toward the ladies. Guys, sure, for the reality check of the fact that, you know, you're not packing on tons of muscle without steroids. But for ladies to understand where that extra weight is coming from. If you are only putting on, you know, the piddly little amounts that we saw when we were dealing with the ground beef, where is the extra weight coming from? And we all know our enemy, water. Water weight. It comes in all shapes and sizes. But if you know that you can gain, you know, a pound a month in muscle, or a quarter pound a week in muscle, you know, you are going to step on the scale and you're going to weigh more than probably a quarter pound or a pound, a quarter pound a week or a pound per month. You are going to find that extra water weight. Not just water weight, obviously you're building bone mass. You are going to, you're lifting and eating in a way that pulls more glycogen into the muscles. So when you're pulling that glycogen into the muscle, it is going to retain, guess what? more water. So, you know, we have a gallon of water here, and then obviously just a little pint here, and a little over a pint, about a pint and a half, almost 2 pints in the San Pellegrino. So water, you can see it too. I know sometimes we think that we can't see water weight, but we really can. And we say, you know, we don't want to give water the blame, but the water weight comes in more than we would expect. So when you gain that pound a month in muscle, you're not just gaining a pound, period. More is going to come with that. You're going to tip the scales in a little bit higher because of the fact of how you're lifting and eating. You are going to have more food in your stomach more often, and food carries weight. So if you have food in your stomach, and sometimes it takes, you know, a day or two for certain foods to fully digest, you're going to still carry that on you, and it's going to transfer to the scale. So it's not only going to make you weigh more, but you're going to look bigger. You're going to look more full and rounded. And to give you an idea of what I mean by this, I'm going to have to bring the ground meat back into the picture here, okay? So I know you're tired of these still shots, but here's our ground beef. Okay, so now when you compare that to even that amount of water, what do you see more of? Do you see more of the meat or of the water? This is what happens. This is what you see sometimes. This is why sometimes you are gaining muscle, but you don't see it. Compared to any of these amounts of water, depending upon how much you're carrying at any given time, what do you see more of? You're going to see the water. So you cannot get upset and think, oh, I'm not gaining anything, because, you know, maybe you don't feel it or you don't see it. Now, this is one of our smaller amounts. This is that 1/4 pound. Okay, this is that 1/4 pound of ground beef again, and we see here, even when it's compared to the different amounts of water, what do you see more of? You still see more of the water than you do of the meat. So you are going to have times where all you see is water. You're going to have times where you feel like there are no changes, but that does not mean that the changes aren't happening. So this is just something to keep in mind, because a lot of times we dismiss the extra water retention that comes along with lifting, but you have to know that it is coming. You are going to get extra water. You're going to have either small amounts or large amounts. More than likely, you're going to have these large amounts of water because of the fact that you are lifting like crazy. You are adding more carbs to your diet, which the carbs are their source of energy, but they're going to pull water into that muscle. Muscle is 70% water, so you're going to see the water. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to know the whole picture. You have to understand how the ratio of muscle to water will work, and you have to be willing to accept that in your journey. So once again, our meat is back in the picture. Our water is in the picture. And again, we don't know how much fat is being accumulated or how much food we've eaten at the time. But these are the things that your body will be going through and gaining during the process. The water is not necessarily a bad thing, but just know that it's there. And even though you may think that it's not that big of a deal, if you've ever picked up a gallon of water, you know that it is heavy, and water does have weight. So do not underestimate it. Try to stick out your muscle building phases for as long as you can, because you want to be able to maximize and have the full piece to the puzzle, and you want to be able to hopefully accumulate more than that, because you're not going to necessarily be able to see it all when you have all the water and everything covering it. So this is just something to consider, and I hope that that helped somebody to be able to visualize the muscle and how it is dispersed all over your body.